Now, the guns themselves, I have a 30mm cannon in the nose, and I have two 7.62 or 13mm equivalent in the nose as well. I get confused sometimes on the different variants. I'll be right back with the answer. Okay, yeah, there we go. 30mm Mark 108 mounted in the center line, just shooting through the propeller. Well, you can see the muzzle right there coming just right through the propeller. And then two, these are MG 131 13mm, or basically a 50 caliber type or equivalent guns that I have right there mounted, firing through the propellers. Now, for indications, I have a quantity of ammunition remaining for the MG 131s right here. So these are preset, and I can use actually this little dial right here. So these are preset on the ground to whatever they're loaded with, and well, I guess you have that same function right here. You have like a little master arm switch right there, so if I have that down, squeeze the trigger, I can't fire. If I have it up, squeeze the trigger, I can't fire. That is provided that I have the trigger guard disabled. And I think for the air start, I know I didn't consciously enable it, so I think for an air start it's enabled by default. And I just have it mapped to my stick, so that when I actuate that, the trigger guard just kind of comes up, and then I can start to fire the weapon. Now, for the gun itself, I also have this switch down here. This is a two-position switch, left being enabling the Mark 108 cannon, right enabling the rockets, if I had rockets on the wing. So if I fire right now, I'm just firing. Is that right? Let me go to the external real quick, make sure that I'm not lying to you. Yeah, that's right. That switch disabled the cannon. Now if I re-enable it, put the switch back to the left, and try to fire the cannon, now it fires. So one button on the stick for the 13mm, another button on the stick for the 30mm. I have them mapped to, I honestly can't remember which is which now. I have them mapped just to a place that made sense on my real world stick. I'll be right back with the answer on that, which button is which. Okay, so the 13mm is just, you can't see it, it's on the other side of the stick, but it's an actual, like, no kidding trigger. That's what fires the 13mm. And the 30mm Mark 108 is this button right here. So I have this button, which is for bombs release. I have a cannon recharge button right here. So if I were to be firing and jam the Mark 108 3mm cannon, I could attempt to recharge it by depressing this button, which I think I also have mapped to a button on my HOTAS. And I have a gun camera button, which I don't think has any known function, or a function in the aircraft just yet, also mapped. So that's how that works. So two different buttons for the two different guns. Master arm up here for control of whether or not anything on the aircraft fires. So if I were looking to get set up for a guns pass, I would start with master arm to arm. I would enable the trigger by just lifting the trigger guard, and then I would, if I wanted to fire the cannon, make sure this switches to the left position. Then this button to fire the cannon, the trigger to fire the guns, or fire them all at one time. There we go. That's, in a nutshell, how the gun system works. I also have the capability to carry a bomb on the center line, and I think eventually we'll also get the ability to carry wing cannons under like a little underwing gondola, and those will be controlled by using this switch, I think. Yeah, wing cannons. Turn that on, and the cannons under the wing would be active if I did have cannons under the wing, which I don't. And if I had rockets under the wing, and that would enable the rockets to be fired using the same button that I currently use to fire the 30mm cannon. So that's actually kind of complicated. It's more complicated than I would have expected for a World War II German aircraft. But you know, it's, as I guess more and more systems start to be brought online, especially in a compressed time frame, like you would have seen in World War II. You know, you would start with the base design, or just a basic aircraft design, and then as things get added, you would just kind of have to piggyback them onto the the existing design as you could. So I guess that's the reason for these. I mean, just different switches at different positions around the cockpit for all these different functions. Now, I didn't even mention the bomb controls. So we have it's basically just a fuse control down here with AOS just being there to give you the capability to release a bomb without arming the fuse. And then we have different fuse settings for MV and OZ, STURS and Wagerst for either a dive bomb or sort of like a level skip bombing type delivery. Let me read back up on that a little bit, and I'll come back with the answer on exactly what that does. And we'll of course look at it again once I take an aircraft up with a bomb load. So I'll be right back. So yeah, that was basically correct what I just went through. STURS on the left is for dive bombing, and Wagerst on the right is for sort of level bombing. And then we have two settings for each of these, MV and OV. MV being the delay setting, OV being the instantaneous setting. So yeah, we'll look at this again once we get into some bombs delivery. I think we have a mission coming up that is specifically for that. And I am still feeding from my drop tank. I'm beginning to suspect that something is just wrong here. It could have something to do with all that fuel that I have back there in my MW50 tank also feeding in, but I was just not expecting this type of life from the fuel tank. I mean, what could be happening is that I'm burning fuel from my main tank. That's the only place that goes directly into the engine. So what could be happening here is that as fuel feeds from the MW50 tank into the main tank, that it's not allowing fuel to feed from the centerline drop tank. So I think that's actually what needs to happen, is that fuel isn't going to feed until I start to deplete from the main tank. So all this time, I think I was going off the MW50 tank fuel, and then once that's depleted, then it goes to the drop tank, and once that's depleted, the fuel flow here shuts off, and then I just go from the main tank, and that's when my fuel quantity gauge starts to go down. That sounds very, very reasonable. That's exactly how I'd expect it to work, and that's exactly, based on observation here, exactly how it is working. So yeah, I'm content with that, and yeah, I'm happy now. That explains why it's showing feeding from the tank, but I think that's just, I don't think it's actually feeding. I think that's just there because there is fuel in the tank, and I'm not actually feeding from the tank just yet. So yeah, anyway, that's basically it for how the weapon system itself works. Now, well, while I'm here, let me employ the gun a little bit, and I'll start to look at the gun sight. Now, I'll pick a target out here. I might just make this my own little shooting gallery and just shoot at some of the civilian traffic, which, for my purposes, I'll assume this isn't civilian traffic at all. Actually, no, better yet, I'll go for some oil equipment out here. So since I have a fixed gun sight, what I'm going to do is roll in, and I'm not going to get any kind of an update from the gun sight as far as, you know, accounting for bullet drop as I go. I just have to do that on my own. So I just need to line up on my target, and I'll just try this one pure, just fire when the target was right there at the reticule. And I think that this is set up, you know, it's set up for a specific range. So I think if you time it correctly and just take some trial and error here, I think if I time this correctly, I just need to find the range. I can find the range where just having the center of the reticule right there at the target is going to work just fine. And then for the longer the range gets, the further down on the scale I'll have to go. So let me come back around, make one more pass on the oil rig out here. And I think I did this in a lot more detail on the Focke-Wulf 190. I actually had like little range indicators set up. I had measured everything out in the mission editor and got really, really in depth on it. That might have been actually the MiG-15 that I did that for, but I'll kind of I'm just not in the mood to do that for this series, so I'll just kind of wing it on this one. So I'm going to go for this little oil well out there. So I'll just kind of try it from whatever range that I'm at right now. See where the bullets drop. Yeah, way short. So if I'm at this range, that's pretty much it. Now you also want to be careful not to get too close, because if you do fire the gun from too short a range, then you're going to have the bullets ricochet, and you could have them ricochet back up into your aircraft. And you can also see that I'm starting to get a little bit low on those MG151 rounds that I have in those guns, but I still have the 30mm cannon there in the center line that I can use. Let me come around one more time. Actually, I'll line up on these oil fields, and what I'll do is I'll do it from kind of a longer range, but I'll use the bottom tick mark as the point that I'll line up on. So let me set up on this one. We'll go for the bottom tick mark. We'll see how that does. At this point, I'm just kind of working on eyeballing it. Okay, so that was a little bit long. I'll come around one more time, and about that same range, I'll just go for the center tick mark right there, which I'm sure these correspond to a specific mil setting, a milliradian setting. If I had to guess, that looks like about 25 and 50 mils with the circle at a different mil setting. Actually, that's kind of important for me at least to know. Let me see if it gives me how many mils the circle is at least, and I'll be right back. Okay, there we go. That's what I was looking for. It's a 50 mil radius circle, so 100 mils from, for the diameter, 50 mils down here to the radius. And once you, and that's kind of like a standard way of expressing how far down from the zero sight line you would aim. You have the capability in many aircraft like the A-10, or thinking about aircraft before the CCIP systems or automated bombing systems really got introduced. You would set the sight to a specific mil setting, and then you would go for a specific dive angle and altitude for a release and airspeed for a release, and then you would just line the sight up at a specific mil setting, and then when the sight intersects the target, you would release the weapon. So that's usually how you'll see a sight depression angle expressed, is in mils. So I just know that this is at 50 mils, and as you get into, especially in the F-86, I think at one point I had this little table cheat sheet worked out where I had just for different dive angles and different ranges, different mil settings for where rockets would impact. I think specifically is what I did that for. And you would also do the same thing for a gun. So let me come back around here one time. Well, I'll stripe one of these vehicles, just a random vehicle out there, and boy, I've still got that tank feeding. I don't know if that's ever going to run out of fuel, but yeah, let me strafe something real quick. Let me ditch the checklist. Yeah, I'll just line up on this vehicle. So I need to lead it a little bit, and also, depending on the range that I fire from, have it at a specific mil setting below the zero sight line. So okay, that's a good lead angle. That's a good range. I'll just go for the right about there. Didn't lead him enough, but that would have been okay. Even doing it like that, just a little bit short. So it's a lot of trial and error, and it's a lot of just coming up with, when you start to make attack after attack, you'll start to kind of get your own little preference on the sight picture, how zoomed in or how zoomed out you are. This is about as far as I like to zoom in right here anymore. And you'll just kind of get your own little feel for how far out or how close or how far away from the target you like to fire. And then once you start to kind of get your own feel and get your own little preferences, then you can really start to use these tick marks and start to use the gun sight to your advantage for, not only an air-to-ground attack, but also for an air-to-air attack. That's what these indications on the sight are for. Okay, so I've got a target out here going slightly away from me. I can push in a little bit closer on this one, I think, and I'll just try to line up on it, and I'll just go for just above this little middle tick mark, just for, what I'm finding is my preference in this model of 109. Right about there. Yeah, that's... it takes trial and error. And, boy, that must not have been moving across the ground as fast as I thought it was. But, that's the basic concept behind this. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, because we, I think, have some missions dedicated specifically to gunnery coming up. So I will be back in a bit. Yeah, one thing I didn't mention is that the different guns are going to have different impact points and different ballistics for the shell. So, for example, if I try this with a 30 mil, actually, let me see, I've got to enable the, yeah, I left this switch over in the left position. Yeah, if I had tried one of these targets with a 30 millimeter gun, I would have had a different impact point for each of the different types of rounds. Let me see if I can illustrate that by coming up here to kind of a higher altitude. I'll fire both gun types at one time. We'll just kind of watch where the bullets impact. I think it'll be a little bit more evident from a longer range. So let's go for something about like that. We'll just kind of measure in relation to the road where these things impact. Okay, yeah, so yeah, you saw the 30 mil shells way short, the other's way long, or at least that's what I thought it was, and unfortunately I think I'm out of I think that depleted the MG151 rounds, but that illustrates the point right there, is that, you know, different gun types have different ballistics, and especially with a fixed sight like this, or, you know, with any type of sight where that's the case, you just have to take that into account when you're lining up on a target. So let me come around here on one more thing, and I'll spend the rest of my 30 mil on some targets out here, and then I might just kind of put this either in this mission or do some time acceleration just to get this fuel depleted and get me to lunch, because it's got time to eat something. So let me roll in on these oil fields one more time. I'll put some 30 mil into, hopefully, a target. And one thing that I didn't notice on those first passes is that, yeah, I need to put in just a little bit of left rudder to maintain coordinated flight. That's also very, very important when it comes to effective gunnery, is making sure that you're doing it from with coordinated flight as well, because you don't want to fire your weapon out into any kind of like a side slip. You don't want any side slip on the aircraft, because the airstream would then not be coming straight at the bullet. It would kick it off to one side or the other immediately after it fires in those cases. So the better coordinated your flight, the better gunnery effects you're going to have. Although it's not going to make that much of a difference one way or another. But ideally, you want to be perfectly coordinated. And I was saying correct before, it was the 30 mil that had depleted before, and not the 13 millimeter, like I had thought. But okay, I have got a stop to the fuel flow from the drop tank, and I'm going to see the fuel gauge start to come down here eventually. So yeah, I guess I'm going to press on here and see how long this takes, and see the light come on, and I'll be back when that happens. Talk to you in a bit.